lot of the best music happening right now is happening in Japan. There's a lot of really interesting and progressive stuff coming out of Japan, and a lot of this stuff is like weeb adjacent. So I think one of the reasons why this music from Japan is so good is that it's all based in popular music genres like rock and weeb, like anime stuff. It has that grounding in human biology that popular music appeals to, like the biological urge to move your body when you hear a rhythm, or the effect that the human voice has on human psychology. This is what pop music is good at, and I think that progressive music, and especially like academic music, can lose sight of the fact that music basically has to do with biology, the human voice, or human vocal substitutes, and rhythm that makes you want to move. And this is what pop music is good at. On the other hand, when pop music loses the innovation and creativity of the artistic drive, it becomes just corporate garbage, just endlessly repeating 4 chords over a beat just to play in a mall or a club, and it ceases to be anything that I would listen to. And I think that's the problem in the West. Most stuff in Japan is still bad, because most music is boring. But it seems to me that Japan has a higher frequency of actually good music coming out. So I would like to introduce a few categories of music. First of all, there's just good old anime music. Anime music is not spectacularly groundbreaking, but what it does have is the ability to slip in interesting things. Interesting chord progressions, riffs, rhythms, time signatures, and just make it sound natural. Like, I didn't even notice that the Clannad After Story opening had bars of 7 in it until I started counting. And it just slipped in there. It sounds completely normal, but it actually isn't 7 for a few bars. The second Owari no Seraph ending is pretty amazing, rhythmically, harmonically, just how it's composed. It goes beyond just like a pop tune. God Bless You by Girls Dead Monster has this cool part where it just modulates through all 12 keys at the end. That definitely was interesting when I first heard it. The Majo no Tabi Tabi ending was cool. It has like odd meters, it's fun. And like a lot of anime soundtracks just have some cool stuff going on. Video game music, I don't know the most about video game music, but there's a whole like VGM community and they're constantly like nerding out over Japanese video game music. I think JRPG music sounds cool from what I've heard, though I haven't heard much of it. I want to get into it though. So like anime has really cool stuff in it, and this brings us to like whoever decided to pick the Tokyo Ghoul openings had extremely good taste. They chose some poppy prog bands like TK from Ring Toshite Shigure, and I think that's part of like a bigger genre of like poppy prog, more mainstream sounding like J-rocky stuff with prog elements. So like Ring Toshite Shigure is good, Soko ni Naru is an amazing band. The other Tokyo Ghoul opening, Koshunie, I don't know how to say it. And there's a lot of stuff like that. And then the second Tokyo Ghoul opening, which a lot of people didn't like, probably because it was like too high IQ for them, was by Osterreich. And Osterreich is a project by the guitarists from the Cabs, which is a math rock band. They're very influential in math rock. There's a lot of other Japanese math rock bands like Light, Tricot, Pens, Plus, and like Ichika Nido, one of the most influential guitarists right now. Every guitar player is like trying to sound like Ichika now. And that brings us to like Prog and djent. Because like Ichika used to do more like djent stuff. I wish he would do it more, but he did some ridiculous djent tracks. He collabed with a few like djent bands like Earthis and Von Citizen. Earthis is Japanese, Von Citizen is from China. And like within this weeb like prog genty spheres, like Kenshiro from White Fists is a play on his name. He is ridiculous musician. He's a genius. I love him. He like goes beyond like the prog genre. He's amazing at sound engineering and creating soundscapes that go beyond standard prog, but he's a ridiculous guitarist, and he always has like that prog and djent influence. He makes music for rhythm games too. Guitarists on Demand is a bunch of guitarists, not exclusively Japanese, but a lot of them are, and they have a few albums, and they just have so much talent on there. It's ridiculous. I found so many good guitarists. They're all vaguely like proggy, but they all have cool stuff going on. There's a lot of like weeb stuff in there too. Jazz, it's really good. And that brings us to like Japanese like djent and like modern metalcore. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. On the djent side, there's Earthists, Alternations, and a lot of other bands. On the metalcore side, there's so many. Like Japanese metalcore is really interesting, because from how I see it, there's like the metalcore is such a big genre, and in Japan there's like an interesting like Japan exclusive subgenre of metalcore. It's basically like really heavy visual K band like J-rock. So stuff like Dexcore, which is an amazing band, falls under this category. So they have like super heavy like deathcore breakdowns and like anime opening choruses. They sound like your favorite like visual K band plus like deathcore breakdowns, and I like that. There's like Nocturnal Bloodlust and Deviloof on the visual K-ish side of the metalcore spectrum. They're like deathcore, I guess. And then there's the more like Western influenced metalcore bands like Victim of Deception and Her Name in Blood. I guess they're like deathcore-y. In more Western influenced metalcore, there's like Crystal Lake, who everyone loves. There's Cold Rain, Sable Hills, A Crowd of Rebellion, Abstracts, and Seagate. I like all of them. There's Crossfaith. There's a bunch of really good Japanese metalcore bands, but they're like very Western influenced, so they speak in English. Whereas something like Dexcore is more based in like Japanese visual K stuff. That's a really interesting Japanese music subgenre. And then just like in metal in general, there's more like Japan exclusive subgenres like the idol metal and kawaii metal. Like everyone knows baby metal, but there's also Broken by the Scream, Dazzle Vision, Doll's Box, Passcode, and Lady Baby. Pretty cool. And then there's also just like what I call progressive weeb. So that includes like Neko Hacker, who is just really innovative and is super weeby, but he's also a guitarist who likes prog and djent stuff. There's Mafu, who is definitely super progressive. He does a ton of cool stuff while keeping it super poppy. And then there's like prog vocaloid like Iowa, Sasakure UK, Cosmo, Buso P. I think Manashi, the pianist, released a cool track. I wish he would release more original stuff instead of just covers, so I love his covers. In like rhythm game music, there's a whole ton of ridiculous stuff coming out. Like everyone knows Camellia, but there's also like Shi, Sakujo, Feriquitus, there's Hagane or Steel Plus. There's a bunch of like cool stuff in the Diverse System label. 80 Piano has a lot of cool stuff. There's this whole genre of stuff that sounds like prog rhythm game music called Artcore. Has a lot of cool stuff. I want to look more into Artcore. I'm like a Artcore noob, but it sounds really cool. And then there's like jazz fusion, like Hiromi, who is one of the best pianists in the world, probably technically ridiculous pianist. I love when she does like jazz fusion stuff. It sounds really cool. It sounds mathy. It sounds Japanese to me. She does this thing a lot, especially in solo piano pieces, like Kaleidoscope and one of the songs with Chick Corea. She's playing with Chick Corea, so she's ridiculous already. But she goes in the chorus and it's just like an anime chorus and it sounds amazing. Just like playing playing an anime chorus with chicoria, which is ridiculous. There's Hakushi Hasegawa, who is one of the most insane musicians on the scene in the world right now, in my opinion, doing like weeb jazz fusion, collaborating with Vocaloid producers. There's this utaite called Lhasa, who's also like a jazz singer and collaborates with Sasakure, doing just super cool like jazz weeb fusion. And then there's also like contemporary Japanese like classical stuff, and I think it's interesting because it's so influenced by jazz. There's Yoshimatsu Takashi, who is a well-known contemporary classical composer who's in a lot of classical repertoire in music conservatories in the US and stuff like that. And he also composed the Astro Boy soundtrack, the 2003 version. To me, he sounds like if you took like contemporary classical and like Ghibli and jazz and like put it together. It's cool. There's also Karen Tanaka, pianist, great composer. I was drawn to her because her stuff sounds kind of like an anime soundtrack to me. I enjoyed that. There's Kubota Mina, who is an anime soundtrack composer, but also is like a classically trained pianist. She does good soundtracks. There's a lot of like classically trained pianists and composers who are doing like soundtracks for anime, and I'm not the biggest fan of like common practice period music. I just enjoy the fact that contemporary classical music in Japan is frequently stuff that I think sounds good, whereas in the West, in my experience, most contemporary classical music is either very strange experimental music or Beethoven over and over, which is fine, but it's not my favorite thing. So I appreciate contemporary Japanese classical music. And I guess that brings us just to anime soundtracks in general. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on, but specifically, I think one of the most important things to happen to film music in general has been Hiroyuki Sawano. Everyone loves him, everyone knows him. In my opinion, he took the contemporary Western style of film music, which is super influenced by like Hans Zimmer and stuff like that. A lot of it focuses on creating a soundscape to enhance viewing experience, which is what it's for, but a lot of like Hans Zimmer's stuff will just completely lack a melody. It'll just be epic noises. Just like insert epic noise here to make scene more epic. And that's fine, but like Sawano takes the epicness of that kind of music and actually makes it listenable on its own. So what he'll do is he'll take like, often like in Kill la Kill or Owari no Seraph or Attack on Titan, he'll take like some theme, some singable melodic element. It might be from the opening or something, and he'll just epicify it. Like, everyone knows that song from Attack on Titan. It's such a catchy melody, but it's also just as epic as like something from like the Dark Knight soundtrack, which I enjoy, but like most of the Dark Knight soundtrack is just epic stuff with no melody. The only melody that's present in the Dark Knight soundtrack is it's like 2 notes. It sounds great, but it's literally 2 notes. Whereas Sawano has so many memorable, melodic, and extremely epic songs. Like that instrumental version of Before My Body Is Dry from Kill la Kill is unbelievable. The instrumental version of the Owari no Seraph opening is insane. I love how Sawano can take and just epicify simple melodies that people remember, and I think that's what it should be about. I think Sawano has contributed positively to development in cinematic music globally. He's definitely one of the best around. He's kind of overrated. Well, like, not really overrated, just that everyone else is underrated. He definitely deserves his hype, but there's so many other composers in anime that are worthy of hype. Kevin Penkin gets some recognition these days, so that's good. I like Kevin Penkin. I think Hirano Yoshihisa, who composed the Death Note and like Hunter x Hunter soundtracks, is really great. Kajiura Yuki and Yoko Kanno, obviously, pretty well known. Yeah, anime has good music. Japan has good music. Listen to Prog Weeb and listen to more Japanese music because it's good.